Welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vaish, your host, founder and CEO of BoostSolo. My next guest is a leadership coach who brings a unique blend of HR expertise, soulful insights, and a touch of gaming flair to help leaders align mind, body, and soul. Damesha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you
It's
having me on.
It's great to have you here, and I'm excited for our conversation. So let's just jump right in. So you transitioned from a corporate HR and recruiting as a corporate HR and recruiting leader to founding Level Consulting and Craig Network. So was there a key moment or an experience that led you to take the leap to solopreneurship?
Yeah, I think a few things. Like any of us, you start questioning, what's more, what's out there for me. And I really wanted to tap into more of my gifts because I felt like, I'd done so much over the course of my, I think 12 plus years working in tech. I worked not only in early stage startups, but also growth stage startups and VCs. And so I really wanted to tap into my unique gifts and actually spend time pouring into myself, which I'd never done. And really what came out of that self-reflection and just alone time was me joining the Jay Shetty Coaching Certification School, earning my coaching certification there, and also building my agency, the Craig Network, which is an HR, kind of talent agency, along with the coaching, which partners really nicely with it. And that's where Leveled Coaching was born.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, a lot of people sort of do. Sometimes there's an external impetus, but it seems like yours was more internal, which is great. But both are.
Yeah, I would say it's a combination, though, right? Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's the external things that jolt the internal. So
True. So when you first transitioned from corporate to solopreneurship, was there actually any moments you doubted your decisions, and how did you overcome those doubts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like anyone, I definitely didn't think I was quite prepared. And so I knew I had a lot to learn. But I felt like that's been my entire career. The mantra for my career has been, I'm on this kind of pace to just learn as much as I can. And I always felt like I was a little behind. And so, I had seen, companies being built working internally, but it's very different starting from scratch. And so there was definitely moments of, where I questioned is this the right direction for me at this moment. But at the same time, I think I overcame it because I went internal and I spoke to my higher power, who I call God. And this is what God wanted. So I'm not leading from, a place of ego or, like going down a road that's, more self-serving, if you will. I think I've really tapped into what my purpose is here. And that's what has allowed me to really push forward and push past the fear. And I'm kind of a person that leans into fear. I figure if it scares me, I'm exactly where I need to be.
That's great. So you see, it sounds like you use it as fuel, and you still do.
Absolutely.
It sounds like, yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
So now most people have sort of a picture in their mind when they're taking this leap. I've heard people say, "Oh, everyone said the moment you do it, all the clients will come. Just like go out and build it," right? So when you first started your entrepreneurial journey, what expectations did you have about this solo journey and owning a solo business, and how has that compared with the reality?
I think I didn't have a lot of preconceived kind of expectations because of the fact that I've worked for early growth stage startups. And
Right.
I see how hard it is to attract talent with these VC backed, funded companies, so I didn't necessarily think like, oh, the clients will come or, things would be easy. I think I went into it knowing that it was going to be hard and knowing that I needed to treat it more like a marathon than a sprint. And I'm naturally a sprinter. I'm a former athlete, Division I athlete who sprinted her way through life. And so I think just working on that mindset shift was really what I needed to do. And really just, I set a goal of being 1% better every day.
That's great. And that's actually great advice for anyone starting out, right? Because most people want to sort of run the entire marathon really fast and not reserve any energy until the
Oh,
end.
yeah. No, and honestly, I think too, I casted a wide net. So this was one learning that I did is it's a double-edged sword because a lot of times like it confuses your customer in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, because they're trying to figure out, like, okay, what exactly do you do? But at the same time, I wouldn't trade it and the learnings I discover out of that. And so I would say, before you start listening to all the gurus and mimicking what they do, you really need to know what works for you. And the only way to do that is by trying and failing. And so I welcome failure all the time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you said that, because I mean that's really important. You have to sort of embrace it, because you can't. I always say you can't have success or even understand success unless you've tasted failure, right? Because you need
Absolutely.
the comparison. But so it
Absolutely.
sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you say is rather than niching down, you went wide first in terms
Yeah.
of customers. So you sort of threw your net out wide, which, as you
Yeah.
said, most people, like even I would tell you, you should find your niche. But it
Yeah.
sounded more to me like you already had an offering. You were just trying to find the right audience to
Yes.
deliver it to, right?
Exactly.
You weren't just it wasn't just scattershot. Like,
No, no, and I think too, it's similar to how I approach recruiting, right? And I
yeah,
took this similar concept where you're constantly A/B testing things, right?
right.
And so I believed in actually doing an ABCD test and taking all the learnings from those testings and then putting it, like, okay, this worked, this didn't work, and kind of crafting my ideal customer, if you will, that way. And I started doing a lot of things, like, and I think I, even when I started my podcast, I always try to do the hard thing first.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, a lot of podcasters start with just audio,
Yes.
and I actually started with video, and so I, that same, I think mindset, it really boils down to my mindset. It's like I really wanted to do the hard things first, and so I put myself out there a lot, from social media posts to going live, and really just building that muscle, over and over, because I was more introverted, like I was behind the scenes. You work in HR, you're somewhat the face, but you're also very much behind,
True.
and so I think just building up that confidence to put myself out there in a really raw way, was what I heard from my higher power, and that's what I did.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, it's like, and I think it's almost sort of the flip side of it, right? Because we talk about product market fit, but it's almost like customer product fit, right? So you went out with a product trying to figure out right size it for the right customer, and so I get that, because that's kind of what I'm doing with my first product, BoostSolo, too,
I love
is
that.
just figuring out my niche. So,
Yeah, and
um,
also, do you love it? That's the other
yeah,
thing.
true.
Like, Rick Rubin talks about that, as he works with artists. It's like you make and create things for yourself too. So I thought about all the problems that I encountered, like, as a leader, when I was looking for a coach, when I was, evaluating coaches, like, just all of those things. Like, I made it for myself too, and the challenges that I encountered.
Yeah, and someone I think much wiser than me once said the best solutions are problems you faced yourself, right? Because
Exactly.
inevitably we all face the same problems, no matter how much we might want to feel like we're different. So your brand focuses on aligning mind, body, and soul for leadership excellence. Could you talk about how you came up with this positioning?
Yes, I thank you so much for asking me that. Honestly, like, my vision was really inspired by Carl Jung,
Yeah.
who is really one of the most profound thinkers in psychology. And I really wanted to create a world where leaders can show up as their authentic selves, like operating from a place of really inner peace, which is something that I was always striving for, as well as a place of wholeness rather than a fragmented version of themselves. And, you know, I came up with the name Leveled because when I first started, it was Level Divine, or Level D, which is the D stood for divine. But I also wanted to make it easier for people to understand that they first needed to be honest with themselves in order to approach this, and honest with me in order for me to partner with them along on their journey. And so that's where the name Leveled came from. But honestly, it was inspired by Carl Jung and my higher power, and I have always believed, we're all born whole, but then
Yeah.
we have all of these experiences that carry us through life that kind of pull pieces of our puzzle away or kind of bury them. And it's so important for us to find those pieces again, to put ourselves back together, in a way that our creator really, built us. And, I have gone through life as a leader, feeling like I was serving from a place of a fragmented version of myself rather than a whole version of myself. And I wasn't connecting my mind, body, and soul. And so I thought of a runner, like I'm a former track and field athlete. And in order to run really fast, you can't have any external baggage. You have to let things go. You can't have fear. You have to really operate from a love space and not a fear space. And that's the only way to fly. And
Okay.
so
Mhm.
when I think about leaders, like we are inspiring other leaders, but we have to first feel inspired ourselves.
Yeah, no, very true. And I love what you said about sort of being born whole, because I almost felt
Yeah.
like, a lot of our systems are designed to make us conform rather than be
Yes.
our unique selves, right? Like
Yes.
education comes to mind immediately. It's like they,
Absolutely.
Sir Ken Robinson had that beautiful TED talk. I remember one of the first ones where he
Oh
said
yeah.
we sort of beat the uniqueness out of you
Yeah.
by the time you come out of, and we're sort of out of a factory line where we're all taught to think the same way, be the
Yeah.
same way.
Well,
Yeah.
even beyond education, just our experiences, our
Yeah.
relationships, our family, our, like other leaders that we encounter, working in companies, like so many of our experiences. And then let's add social media on there, and all the dopamine out there that's trying to pull us away from focusing on ourselves. And so my dream is that people become their own muse, and get
Yeah.
really inspired by learning themselves deeply and understanding. And, I use the analogy of a pomegranate, but it's really like peeling themselves back to get to the sweet spot of who they are.
Yeah, no, I love that. I just pictured that now.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, so you talked about something which is very interesting to me from a brand standpoint, right? Because when building your brand, have you found it challenging to balance sort of the spiritual aspects of your message with
Yeah.
the corporate expectations of leadership, which are sort of very tangible and development driven, right?
Yes.
Almost, it's a balancing act in my mind. So how have you sort of navigated that?
Yeah, it is. And I love that you asked that question because that's where I'm still learning, and I feel like I've used my newsletter tremendously to help marry the two.
Yeah.
I have a weekly news, or excuse me, a daily newsletter, Monday through Thursday. I write on Substack. I was the former head of talent at Substack, and so it felt felt natural to go there and build my community there. But it's been really interesting. Because I feel like we have moved, not necessarily away from traditional religion, but we've gotten a lot more spiritual. And so, there is that spiritual component, but also along with the tactical, because we need to be doing too. And so, in order to take care of ourselves, we have to add in some of the tactical things. And so it's been, I would say, a process, like educating. And that's really what it's been taking, is just me educating daily and sharing, a lot of my learnings.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And it's a tough challenge from a
Yeah,
brand
for
building
sure.
standpoint, I can tell you, because they're two very different sides of the brain, if you like,
Yeah,
almost, right? And
absolutely.
yeah, and a lot of people sort of like, especially in the corporate world, the spiritual piece is harder for them to sort of understand or even ingest, right? Even though it's critically important, I think. But yeah, and
Absolutely.
to completing the whole. So the other thing which was interesting to me was you coined the term culture ads, which I love, instead of like culture fits. So can you talk a little bit about this concept and how it's become part of your brand?
Well, first, I wish I coined that term. I
Oh,
did
okay.
not, but I've been using it for quite some time because it's really this. I would say at the beginning of my career, we have always looked for. I started in video games, and we have never just looked for cultural fits.
Right.
We've always looked for people who could come in and up level, like think outside of the box, if you will. I don't really care for that term, but for the sake of time, like thinking in ways that really help move the needle towards the north star of the business, in a way that we may have not even thought of. And
Right.
so when I look for talent, I really look holistically. I don't just look at resumes or what people have done in the past. I'm looking for who are you, and what can you add to the organization that's going to inspire others, but also be able to do the job in a way that maybe we didn't even think of, and maybe you have some unique talents that, we wouldn't necessarily screen for this particular job, but that can really just, build the organization up in a way that, again, like I said, we didn't think of.
Yeah, again, I actually, we didn't set this up, but I love that you said that because, like, I think that's one of the things that has almost disappeared in hiring today is people look for this box, right, and a
Yeah.
checklist. They
Yes.
don't look
Most
for.
recruiters.
Yeah, I always say I always want to hire people who've never done the job before, who are just smart, who can learn because exactly what you said will happen. They bring, again, not to use out of the box, but they bring a completely different perspective to the same job, right? Rather
Yeah.
than if someone who's done it for 20 years the same way, you'll get them doing the same thing in the same way. So I never understood that. It is a bit of a risk, but
Yeah.
I think there's a greater reward too, right?
There is, and I think it's again goes back to educating and being a lot more patient. I think in my career I've learned to be a lot more patient, and not just only look for talent that maybe went to some of the larger organizations or went to a certain school, or that only tells me what the person did in the
Yeah,
past, but it doesn't tell me how they're going to up level this organization and how they're going to inspire others. The best leaders create other leaders, but they first need to be able to inspire them. And so I always look for people who like know themselves, and beyond the elevator pitch, beyond those things. So when I talk to them, like I rarely talk about just what they did, like I want to get to know them. And so it's a harder sell. There's a lot of leaders who are very open and want to try things differently, and then there's other leaders that take a little bit longer. And so you work with them. It's incremental, going back to the marathon, not the sprint.
true, true. So at least when now as I grow BoostSolo, I know who to talk to about
Yeah.
my hiring needs. So let me now the coaching and consulting market is a very crowded space, and it's been growing everywhere in the world in the US. Right, every time I turn my head, a friend of mine's
And
become a coach.
outside the US, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
everywhere.
Everywhere.
So what's been your biggest challenge in communicating your unique value and like differentiating yourself in this market?
I think I would say is moving away from what everyone else is doing
Yeah.
and taking a completely different approach. And so I again, like I'm no stranger to hard work. I love it and I enjoy, really carving out my way, if you will. And I don't want my path to look like anyone else's. And so I did something really different. Like I started with my newsletter and
Yeah.
social media and really sharing that way. Even before I had a website, before I did all of that, like I wanted to really give things away. And I think a lot of times what I have found in a lot of coaching programs and also agencies is they're always looking to kind of take or sell you something, and I'm not. Like I'm looking to just share ideas, share my learnings, and out of that, people have come. And I use a lot of different avenues to get my messaging out. Like I don't have any crazy systems in place, and not to say that those don't work. They do. I know people that are making tons of money doing that, but that is not my driving force. My driving force is really getting people more to a love space and not a fear space. I think a lot of times we live so much in fear, including building a business. It's constant mind exercises to keep you in that love space and not the fear space. And so, yeah, I mean, it has been challenging in a lot of ways, but it's also been really rewarding. I watched my newsletter grow from 400 on Substack to now over 5,000, and I
Wow.
just joined Substack in June.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And so I think when you have that, kind of heart space as a heartpreneur, as I like to think that I am, I think that people come, because they can feel your energy.
That's a new one. I might have to use that heartpreneur. And but again, a very something you said is an important lesson. I think is I always tell people sort of don't sell your products and services, share
Yes.
your wisdom, right? Because you
Yes.
want people coming to you. You don't want to be chasing them down like But,
No, and
like,
I won't.
yeah,
I
yeah,
won't chase people down. I do one, follow up email, and if they're not ready, that's okay. You
yes,
know, that's
yeah.
okay. I
Yeah,
think
no,
timing and energy is very important.
yeah, I agree. You have to be ready and you have to be open, right, for so many things. And
Absolutely.
people often ask me, well, if somebody doesn't believe in the brand, then how are you going to convince them? And my answer is, I
I'm
won't.
not. Yes.
Yeah, that's not my job to do.
No,
I'm here when they're ready. So yeah, no, I
exactly.
agree with you. It is the harder road, but I think it's the better road and it's a stronger long term foundation that you're building. Again, going back to
Yes.
your analogy of the sprint versus the
Yeah.
marathon. Yeah,
But then also too, like I'm not on anyone's timeline.
yeah,
Like I meet so many people that are trying to rush me, you know, and rush the process. And I mean, I hate to break it to them. I'm difficult to move in that way because I'm on God's timing. And so, I feel like, I'm learning so much in this process that I'm laying, like you said, the foundation. Like I see myself like laying bricks. We all know bricklaying, if you haven't done it before, which I have, it takes a long time. And so I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with failing and breaking some bricks in the process and, figuring out how to put them back together. And so that's really how I see it, and I'm like I said, I'm sure there's people doing it better differently. That's if that works for them. That's beautiful. But, for me, like I really want to learn, like I'm a teacher at heart, but I'm also a student.
yeah. No, that's great. So I want to change gears a little bit and
Yeah.
talk about sort of something else you mentioned in your bio. You mentioned overcoming challenges and rejections in your career, right?
Yep.
Now, can you share a story about one of those tough moments and how it sort of helped you shape your approach,
Yeah, there's so
coaching?
many. I'm like, I'll share, actually my transition going from working in an agency, and then I transitioned into gaming, and I wanted to move into tech, but I didn't have a huge, I would say network in tech. And so I didn't graduate from college. And so that has always been, a bit of a hindrance, which is
Yeah.
why I think for me, like I never really pay attention to where people go to college because I'm like, I want to know who you are. Because it didn't mean I couldn't do the job. It just meant that I didn't finish that particular chapter in my life. And so when I started, I would say interviewing, trying to break into tech, I received over 100 no's.
Wow.
And I knew I was going to get a lot of no's, because I didn't have the background, is very gaming focused. But I have this I'm very like tenacious and like focused and really relentless, to Tim Grover. Shout out to Tim Grover, but very relentless in, a goal that I set. I don't have a plan B. I only have plan A. And then after I finish plan A, then I make another plan A. And so that has been the mantra for my life. And so my plan A was I'm going to break into tech, but it really took over 100 no's for me to get my one yes. And I only got one yes.
Wow. That's
Shout
amazing.
out to Tunin.
Sorry?
Shout out to Tunin, who said yes to me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. Shout out to, yes. Good shout out. But no, that is amazing, and you're right, and obviously the other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you also, and that's a valuable skill to have in your solopreneur journey, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
you're gonna get beaten up, and people are gonna sort of keep saying no to you more often than they say
Yeah.
yes, right? And you have to not take it personally is also where I was going, which goes
Yes.
back to your space of love versus fear and rejection, and because it's
Yeah.
very easy to fall into that trap.
It is. And, I think too, like knowing that maybe the timing isn't right in that moment. And so even if it's a no right then and there, that doesn't mean that it won't be a yes later down the road. And I've experienced that. I mean, I'll tell a funny story about Facebook. I mean, they said no to me tremendously. Like I think I applied to so many of their recruiter positions, and they finally sent a very strong email back to me saying that please don't contact us. We'll contact you. And so this was early on, when
Yeah.
they weren't the way that they are today, but they were very direct. And so, I later fast forward my career, their recruiters were reaching out to me. And so, I say that when you go into things, whether it's entrepreneurship, you're looking for a job, whatever space you're in, sometimes the no is, for your protection. Sometimes it's it means not right now. You need to learn some more. And that's really what I needed to do. And then it may become a yes down the road, or it could be something different and better. And so that's really how I see everything.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to be, and I think it again it helps in this journey. So now I want to touch on your coach, your brand and your coaching philosophy are about aligning mind, body, and soul. We talked about that a little bit. How do you personally maintain the alignment in your
Ooh.
life, and what practices and rituals do you find most effective?
Yeah, I do a few things. I think for me, I'm constantly checking when I say body, I'm not just talking about physical, but really like how do I feel? Like inside. How is the trauma in my body showing up? My
Yeah.
tension showing up, and so I'm constantly doing I call them spot checks throughout my body, all throughout the day because I want to know what energy is getting stored, whether it's positive or negative. And so I'm always doing energy tests. For my mind, I'm an avid reader, which is why if you follow my newsletter long enough, you will soon know that. I have read thousands of books. I'm obsessed with reading, and it's probably I want to get fast to my retirement so I can read more. I love reading, and I love learning, and so I'm constantly, taking in information, but also looking for ways to extract gems, and how can I apply that to my life? So I could be watching a movie, and I'm looking for a gem. I'm enjoying the movie. Don't get me wrong, but I'm also looking for wow, that was a really great lesson. So I do a lot of self reflecting. In the morning, I start with gratitude.
Yeah.
I always write down three things I'm grateful for in the morning, three things I'm grateful for at night, but then I also do this thing called a release. And this
Hmm.
goes back to like, what am I feeling? Like, what do I want to release throughout the day that just doesn't matter? Maybe it was, a hard call. Maybe it was, negative news coming in or anything, right? Like we all have these experiences, these external experiences. So I'm always looking for how can I release that? And then what do I want to surrender? Because I don't need to carry it. I can give it to God, and so that's a practice that I do daily that, amongst a bunch of other things like walking. I love practicing mindfulness. I do mindful walks. I don't like to always sit because I sit for work. So I
Yeah.
do a lot of movement in that way. I do enjoy exercising. I'm probably not like the 7 days a week exerciser, but 3 to 4 days a week, I'm definitely moving my body. But I do take a daily walk. I love walking. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And really for my soul, I pray. I do a lot of praying and meditating, and I focus really in on where have I been used today, and am I being used the way God wants to use me, so I'm always doing that kind of test too. Like it could be anything, something very minor, but I always want to be used, and so that's always been my ask, in everything that I do.
Yeah, and again, I love that. And again, good sort of tangible lessons there, right? Because one of the things that struck me as you talked about this is I do some of those things during the day, but I don't do the release. And very often, just that what you hold on to can mess up your whole day and sort of mess
Absolutely.
up your energy, right? And your focus. So I love the
Absolutely.
idea of the release and the surrender because it's like, and 90% of the things, I would say 95% of the things we hold on to during the day are not worth even thinking about, right?
No,
So
they're
yeah,
not.
in the grand
They're
scheme of
not.
things, yeah, the things
Yeah.
that irritate and throw us off schedule are
Yeah.
really not worth spending our time, wasting our time and energy on, I should say.
Yeah, and I would say the last component is really the energy. I'm always looking at my energy, like what am I giving out, but then also what am I taking in,
Yeah,
and what gives me energy and what kind of depletes my energy. Constantly looking at that.
that's great. So now through your Sunday Soul podcast, you
Hmm.
share insights with a broad audience, right? So what's
Yeah, I
been the
do.
most surprising thing you've learned about yourself or about your audience through that experience?
Wow. I mean, so many things. I think again, going back to the student and the teacher,
Yeah.
like I am so amazed at the community that it's built in such a short amount of time. The podcast, I started June 18th of last year. And, I have recorded, gosh, I want to say like 75 episodes, maybe more. And it has just been like this energy, like positive energy out into the world that has just really been returned to me in ways that I couldn't even describe. And it's been so wonderful for me learning from all of these people. I feel like it's free coaching for me all the time because I have these amazing conversations, and I'm so amazed at how much we are different, but also how connected we are, and how similar we are. We have these common denominators with grief, pain, trauma, transitions, and really love and fear, and whether we're living in a love space or a fear space. And so I'm so amazed at that, every day. And I feel like I learn something new regardless of who I talk to. So for me, that's been wonderful. And then also get this incredible book list that I'm like very excited about. And my audience, I would say I'm just amazed at the feedback, like people send me screenshots of them listening to it in the car, and like it blows me away, because I never really saw myself like I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I never really went forth with it because I was like, wow, that I'd have to put myself out there, And so the fact that I'm doing it and it's really resonating and helping them is, it's been more than I could ever ask for. So
that's amazing. But I'm starting to understand what you mean, because I'm really enjoying, I'm enjoying these conversations a lot.
Isn't it amazing though? Like what you learn, like you've already talked to several people. I've seen some of your episodes. It's like, I'm amazed, like, and people just have these interesting journeys, like, and how they get to where they're going from. Like a lot of the stuff we talk about is going from pain to purpose, on the podcast, and listening to, people's pain, and just, it really puts your life into perspective,
Yeah, but and it goes back to what you were saying earlier. There's so many things that also connect us, right?
Yes.
That's the other thing I found is like, well, we're absolutely unique. Our journey, our story is unique, but the connective tissue of what we experience, our hopes, our desires, our family, our love, our fear is all the same, right? So the underlying tissue is like, it's a shame that we don't see that more, but
yes,
maybe
I'm hoping with your podcast, other podcasts, like people see that, and tune in and listen, because we are like, we saw how divided we were during this election, and it makes me sad on so many levels, because at the end of the day, we're one race, we're human. Like I wear this hat, so I'm surprised I actually don't have it on today, but it says be a good human. And it's a constant reminder to all of us, to live in that love space, regardless of your beliefs, regardless of your, political affiliation, like everything, but to really live in that love space, and create a space for differences, but also like understand we're so connected in so many ways.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I hope we get there. I think we will. It doesn't have to be this way. So I don't think it
maybe not in this lifetime, but I'm very hopeful for the future, and how I just feel like COVID helped tremendously with this. Like I felt like it was a double-edged sword, right? It's like, it's very sad in a lot of ways, cost people their lives in a lot of ways, and really shifted so many things in our world. But I also think it did some good too, because it was eye-opening to so many people, like so many things we were just on the hamster wheel, not paying attention to, forced us to pay attention to it. And so I think people are living a lot more intentionally today.
Yeah.
We realized just how, we weren't well in so many ways as a nation, as a world, and so I think it really forced us to pay attention. And so I see a lot more intentional living, which really inspires me for the next generation, like I'm so hopeful for my children, because I see the parents that are doing the work on themselves. It goes back to leveled. It's like, in order for you to inspire others and to build more leaders, you have to do the work on yourself.
Yeah,
you have to do the work on yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to, really get to a place of forgiveness, with yourself, have empathy for yourself, so then you could have it for others, and create space for others. If you don't create space for yourself, you're not creating it for others.
Very true, very true. And being a history buff, I have to tell you, it's like I think the best of humanities often come from the worst situations, right?
Yes,
it's those jolts and those depths where we rise out of. So
absolutely.
So let me ask you now, if we were to have a coffee or a podcast again 3 years from now, are they where would you want to be, and are there any specific goals or milestones you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, I would say one major goal is really to have leveled, not just in a one-to-one capacity, but also working with organizations. And so a larger goal of mine there is to work internally with managers and leaders, as well as building a community. And so you will see the leveled community come to fruition, hopefully sooner rather than later. But I have a goal around building building more leaders, more intentional
That's great.
leaders.
Great. Well, I wish you luck, and maybe I'll
Thank
get an
you.
invite to the community.
Yes, I would love for you to join. I would love for you to join. I'd love to
Thanks.
have you on my podcast too. I love talking to you.
I would love to be on it. Thank you.
Amazing.
So now, if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you say to them?
I would say first go inward. Go inward. Spend some time with yourself, and really do a deep self reflection to first figure out what you want to build from a heart space, and not just looking at, maybe what's hot or what's what can, build you the most revenue. All those things are very important. But I think in order to have that longevity, you
Yeah.
really it needs to come from a heart space. So doing something that you're really passionate about and that you can do over and over and over and fail at and still show up every day and do it again.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And it is a very lonely journey. So you will be spending a lot of time with yourself. And that's not to
Yes.
say you should be entirely with yourself, but yes, you have to sort of have that inner fortitude. So I agree.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
Ooh, I would say I'll share my favorite quote. I have two, if we have time for two.
Sure.
But two of my favorite quotes, and they're kind of the mantra for my life and how I'm building my businesses. First is by Dr. Maya Angelou, the late great Dr. Maya Angelou. She told Oprah, who was building her school at the time, you don't know what your legacy is going to be. Your legacy is never one thing, but it's every life you touch.
Wow. Yeah.
So doesn't that give you chills? It's like, I want people to remember that, because you don't need to build a business. You don't need to even work in corporate, in order to touch people's lives. And so taking that, you could be a leader in your home. You could be a stay-at-home mom, building leaders, out of your children. And so just remember every interaction that you have, keeping that in mind, that, you can spend 5 minutes with someone and you don't know what they're going to do with that, and so that's one of my favorite quotes. And then the other one, which is really, it almost makes me weep every time I say it, but it's by Irma Bombeck.
Yeah.
And she's a writer. And I found out later that she actually lived in Arizona like me. So it made me feel even more connected to her. But she says, when I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I wouldn't have a single bit of talent left. And I could say, I used everything you gave me.
Wow. Beautiful quote. I love that. I love both of them. They both gave me goosebumps. So,
Yes, me too.
um, so that takes us to our rapid fire round. So I'm just going to throw a
Ooh,
couple of questions at you
okay.
and give it whatever comes to mind.
Oh
There are no
gosh,
right
okay.
answers. Um, if you could create a new holiday for entrepreneurs, what would you call it, and how would we celebrate it?
Oh my goodness. Well, one of my favorite holidays is Valentine's Day, so I might call it Damesha time, because I am obsessed with Valentine's Day. I feel like there's so many other holidays that people don't celebrate, but it's kind of the universal day of love. And so um, maybe I'll call it that, the universal day of love.
I think we need one. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself through coaching others?
Ooh, gosh, that's a tough one. I mean, there's so many things I learned, but I would say um, just how much I care, just
Yeah.
how much I care. I mean, I've always cared about people, but I think when you're coaching someone and they're allowing you to go along on their journey and be vulnerable, it is such a gift. And so I learned, so much about myself, but I would say just how much I love it, and I love coaching people.
That's great. Yeah, I was talking to somebody else the other day because there are a lot of not good coaches out there too, right? So it's really, and people share a lot with their coach. So I love that.
So much.
Yeah,
It's really a privilege. It's
yeah.
honestly a privilege.
If your career transition was a recipe, what would be the secret ingredient?
Love.
Okay, that's great. What's the most unconventional interview question you've ever asked or been asked?
Um, I ask people if you could be an animal, what kind of animal would you be,
Oh, really? Wow.
and why?
Yeah,
And so I always want to know that because it helps me understand like how they think.
that's great. What's one question you wish someone would ask you but hasn't asked yet?
I would say why, my why. What's my why?
That's great. Well, Damesha, it's been awesome having you on the show. I really enjoyed our chat. And, I
I
feel like we got a coaching lesson from you. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for creating space for me to share. This is wonderful.
It was a pleasure.